It was a crisp evening in the late 1950s. The air was thick with the scent of pine trees, and the moon cast eerie shadows on the winding roads. It was the kind of night that felt as though the world itself was holding its breath, as if even nature had grown cautious of what might be lurking in the dark. Teenagers, like most on this warm summer night, were seeking out the familiar comfort of seclusion. Lovers' lanes, tucked away in the woods just outside town, were the perfect spots for couples looking to escape the watchful eyes of parents. The sounds of distant laughter, soft music from radios, and the gentle hum of car engines filled the still night air. But there was something unsettling about this particular evening, a feeling that the night was too quiet, too empty. The road leading to the spot was long and winding, barely lit by the streetlights, which flickered faintly in the distance. The trees on both sides loomed like silent sentinels, their branches swaying ever so slightly in the wind, creating shadows that seemed to shift and stretch across the road. It was the kind of place where the deeper you drove, the more the sense of isolation seemed to grow, wrapping itself tightly around your chest. At the end of this road, a young couple had parked their car, tucked away from the rest of the world. Evelyn and Tom, both barely in their 20s, found solace in each other's company. They'd driven for miles, escaping the clamor of the world, heading into this peaceful but eerie part of the woods. The car was parked with the windows rolled down, just enough to feel the cool night breeze. They weren't scared. This was a classic teenage moment. One of those shared adventures where nothing could possibly go wrong, right? But tonight, something felt different. The radio crackled in the background, playing a soft, upbeat tune, but then it cut off abruptly, followed by a calm yet unnerving voice. The first warning. The voice on the radio interrupted the music, its tones steady, but carrying an unmistakable hint of urgency. Attention, listeners. We have an important update. A dangerous criminal has recently escaped from the local asylum. He is armed and considered highly dangerous. The man, identified as Jonathan Weaver, was convicted for a series of violent crimes, and authorities believe he may be hiding in the wooded areas surrounding the town. He is described as a tall man with wild, unkempt hair and a hook for a hand. If you're in or around the area, please remain alert. Lock your doors and do not approach anyone acting suspiciously. The voice faded out, and for a brief moment, there was only the crackling static of the radio. Evelyn and Tom exchanged a nervous glance, the weight of the announcement slowly sinking in. Oh, a hook for a hand? That part felt like something straight out of a horror movie. Tom let out a nervous laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Come on, it's just a story. They always say stuff like that on the news. People love a good scary tale. Evelyn, on the other hand, wasn't so sure. She glanced out the car windows, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. But what if it's real? What if he's actually out there? Tom waved her off. We're fine. We're in the middle of nowhere, remember? It's probably just some local prank. We'll be all right. Still, a tinge of doubt lingered in the air. The quietness of the woods outside the car suddenly felt more oppressive, and the shadows from the trees seemed to stretch just a little further than usual, as if creeping toward them. Shh. For a few moments, the silence hung thick, only broken by the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. Tom tried to change the subject, but Evelyn couldn't shake the image of the man with a hook for a hand. It seemed too specific to be fake. She leaned back in the seat, her eyes darting nervously between the dark woods and the glowing dashboard lights. And then, just as she was about to speak, a faint sound broke through the quiet night. Something light at first, like a soft tapping against the car's roof. The strange noise. At first, It was so faint that Evelyn thought it was just the wind. Maybe a branch brushing against the roof of the car. But as the sound continued, it grew more distinct. A faint, dragging noise, like something scraping against metal. Tom raised an eyebrow, glancing at her. "What's that?" he asked, his voice a little less confident than before. Evelyn's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. "I don't know. It's probably just a branch." Tom, trying to dismiss the growing unease, leaned over to the passenger side and peered out the window. The trees outside were eerily still, and the darkness seemed impenetrable, as if the forest was holding its breath with them. But then the sound came again, closer this time. Scrack! It was unmistakable, like a metal hook dragging slowly across the roof. Evelyn's hand gripped the door handle tighter. Her mind raced. What could that be? Tom's grin faded as he looked at her. That's not a branch," he muttered under his breath. "Maybe an animal. A raccoon or something." He reached for the ignition, ready to start the car, but something held him back. The sound grew louder, more persistent, almost like it was moving from the roof down to the side of the car, dragging slowly, deliberately. Screak! Evelyn jumped, her breath quickening. "It's too loud for an animal, Tom, and it's coming from above us." Her eyes locked onto the dark shadows outside, but everything seemed too still. Nothing was moving, yet the noise kept going. She could almost feel it now, as if the hook was scraping against her own skin. Tom slowly rolled down the window just a crack, trying to hear better, but the noise stopped for a moment. The night was still, too still. They both stared at the empty woods, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And then, out of nowhere, the noise came back with a vengeance. Screak! It wasn't just on the roof now, it was on the side of the car. They both turned in horror to look at the door handle. The scraping was almost rhythmic, like something, or someone, was trying to get in. Tom's hand hovered over the ignition again, but his voice trembled as he turned to Evelyn. "We're leaving. Now." Before she could respond, he slammed the car into drive and floored the gas pedal. The tires screeched as they sped down the road, leaving the dark forest and whatever was out there far behind them. But as they turned the corner to head back into town, there was something that sent a chill down their spines. A final scraping sound echoed from the rear of the car, as if something or someone was still there, following them. The discovery. They didn't stop driving until they reached the outskirts of town, where the last vestiges of the forest were swallowed by the town's streetlights. Tom's hands were shaking on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, as he tried to shake off the overwhelming sense of dread that had settled over him. Evelyn didn't speak. She couldn't. She was still too shaken, her heart pounding in her chest. For a few moments, they drove in silence, the radio now quiet. The only sound the hum of the car's engine and the rhythmic thud of their racing hearts. Tom finally spoke, his voice tight. "I think we're okay now. We're back in town." Evelyn didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror, as if expecting to see something, or someone, emerging from the darkness. As they neared the intersection, Evelyn's gaze shifted to the passenger side, and there, in the dim light of the street lamps, something caught her eye. Something shiny, something out of place. Her breath caught in her throat. "Tom, stop the car. Stop." Tom's foot slammed on the brake, and the car came to a screeching halt just before the intersection. He turned to her, his eyes wide. "What? What is it?" Evelyn didn't answer at first. She pointed, her finger trembling as she stared at the car's door handle. Tom followed her gaze, his stomach dropping when he saw it. A hook, ... lodged deep into the door handle. The metal gleamed under the streetlight, blood red against the dark night. The very same hook they had heard scraping against the car's roof, scraping against the side as they drove away. For a moment, neither of them could speak. They just stared at the hook, unable to process what they were seeing. Evelyn's voice finally broke through the silence, barely a whisper. It wasn't a story. He was real. Tom's face turned pale. He pulled his hand away from the door handle as if it had burned him. But how? How could he have been there? His eyes darted to the rearview mirror again, but the road behind them was empty. No one was following, no sign of anyone. Yet the hook, the symbol of something far worse, remained. The weight of the realization hit them both at once. The hook wasn't just a creepy story. The man, the criminal who escaped the asylum, he had been there with them, scraping the side of their car. And if they hadn't left when they did, who knew what might have happened next? Conclusion. As they sat there in stunned silence, the realization settled like a heavy weight on their shoulders. The hook was proof. They hadn't imagined it. The man with the hook had been right there, outside their car, possibly only inches away from them, trying to get inside. The thought was enough to make Evelyn's skin crawl. Tom was the first to snap out of the shock. "We need to call the cops, now." He fumbled for his phone, but as he turned it on, he froze. The signal was weak, barely a bar. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. "We're too far from town." Evelyn's eyes scanned the surroundings again, her heart still pounding. "But he's out there, somewhere. Maybe he's gone," Tom said, but the doubt in his voice made it clear that he wasn't so sure. "It's probably nothing now. We'll head home, lock everything up tight, and forget about it." But Evelyn couldn't let it go. She couldn't stop imagining that man, lurking in the shadows, watching them. What if he was still out there? And worse yet, what if he was watching them now? They drove the rest of the way home in silence, the sound of the hook scraping against the metal still echoing in their minds. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but neither of them could shake the feeling that something was wrong, something was unfinished. And as they said their goodbyes, neither of them truly felt safe. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house seemed too loud. Every shadow in her room seemed to shift and twitch. Every time a car passed outside, her heart skipped a beat, as if expecting it to be him, returning to finish what he had started. As she lay there, wide-eyed in the darkness, the image of the hook lodged in the car handle haunted her thoughts. The horror of the night, the terror of feeling hunted, watched, was too fresh, too real. The moral of the story. Evelyn never did let go of the fear that night instilled in her. It became a lesson, a warning. The Hook Man, as he had come to be known in local legend, was no myth. There were always dangers lurking in isolated places, in the quiet corners of the world where no one could hear you scream. The woods, the empty roads, the dark places you thought were safe. They were full of hidden threats. And the Hook Man wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As the story goes, the Hook Man still roams the woods and lonely roads, waiting for his next victim. The radio broadcast might be long gone, but the danger remains. If you're ever driving down an empty road late at night, especially in places where the lights go out, remember this tale. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. And most importantly, never, ever let your guard down in isolated places, no matter how safe they may seem. So, what do you think? Was it just a spooky legend? Or could the Hook Man still be out there, waiting for his next victim? Let us know in the comments. Have you ever had a creepy experience like this? Or maybe you've heard stories from others. Hit the like button if you're feeling creeped out. And don't forget to subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Who knows? The next story could be even scarier than this one. Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones you can see. They're the ones lurking just out of sight.